let's talk about seasonal word study. So every teacher that I work with, once I'm done my shtick, my little song and dance, they say, okay, what's the list of words? Tell me the words I need to study. And that kind of defeats the purpose of like being curious about the world around you and stumbling across words like Lana did when she read that story. By the way, that book, I also bought it because Lana told me to. And there are so many words that you could use for word study in that single text alone. So if you need an excuse to buy the book, there you go. Totally connects to phys ed and wellness, by the way, as well. Anyways, so the world is your oyster when it comes to finding words that you can study and check out. Now, this particular word that what I am studying came from a tweet. And I think you should all be very proud of me because I chose not to engage. With this person. In particular, because they have the word morphology in their bio, which would make me think that they could have this conversation with their 8-year-old, but maybe they were just trying to be funny. And sometimes I don't catch that on the social media. So my 8-year-old is complaining that this object has the wrong name. He says wreath doesn't describe this beautiful Christmas tradition adequately, and it's hard to spell. He wants to rename it bushy circle, and I don't think I can ever call it wreath again. Seriously. Anyway, so I, of course, was like, what do you mean it's hard to spell? Let's look at the word. This is where I have a lot of self-talk in managing my thoughts. So, okay, let's look at the word. So if we hear the sounds, wreath, we have the TH at the end. Can we think of any words that have TH as a grapheme that makes that sound? Yes, many, many words. Then we look at E in the middle of wreath. Can we think of other words where this particular vowel digraph, EA, are coming together to make that sound? Anyone have a suggestion of a word that uses EA to make the E in wreath? Mona and I are on the same page. Look at that. Read, eat. There are many. Okay. Which then leaves us with the WR. Can you think of any words in the history of English that use WR to make an sound? We have right. How about wrist? Yes, Susan, wrap. So all of a sudden, we've taken apart this word and realized that there is nothing, quote, hard to spell about it, because we're having a conversation wherein the phonemes that we hear are matched to graphemes that we know and can all be explained. But because I can't leave anything alone, let's dig a little bit further into WR. So when we look at WR, in and itself is a common Germanic consonantal combination, especially to start words implying twisting or distortion. So fun. Now, does this mean every word that starts with WR has this idea of twisting or distorting? No, it doesn't mean that. But when we see the WR, it might be suggesting to us that it has a German connection, and we might be able to connect it to this idea of twisting or distortion. I also thought this was really interesting, that it was represented by VR in Danish and Swedish, still spelled WR in English, but the W ceased to be pronounced 1450 to the 1700s. So at one point, the W was pronounced, and I can't even make my mouth do that. So, you know, that could be a fun party game at some point, except for in dialects. So there might be still dialects where the W is pronounced in front of the R. So this idea that the WR grapheme has this sense to it, twisting or distorting. So we think about our wrist. Our wrist is the body part that twists. When we're writing something, our letters are twisting or moving on a page. When we're wrapping something, maybe we're twisting and distorting the material that we're using to cover it.
Or when you're wrecking something.
When you're wrecking something. The one that I thought of was like a wrought iron fence. And isn't that when the wrought iron is like twisty?
Mm-hmm.
I think it is. I forgot to look it up. Okay, so then we go and look at the actual etymology of the word wreath. Meanwhile, like if it was my 8-year-old that was like, let's call it a bushy circle, at this point would have given up and left the room for this conversation. But that's okay. We're going to pretend that they're game for this. So we see this Old English. Now, this letter right here is called an F. And it eventually was phased out and replaced by the thorn, which is the P. It looks like a P, but it's got a long line. Now, when you get the slide deck in the speaker notes, I've linked for you an Old English letter pronunciation guide for anyone out there who wants to practice their Old English spelling and or pronunciation. And there's also a link to the letters, the 5 letters that we were taken away, lost when we moved to the printing press. And both the F and the thorn are examples of that. So in Old English, it meant literally that which is wound around. Well, if that's not a perfect explanation for the bushy circle, I don't know what is. Now it's got some Proto-Germanic here, so we're not going to worry about too much about that. And then we get into our pi roots, so we're not going to worry about that. So I thought it was really interesting here. Down in the 1560s was the first time it was meant to do with a ring of garland of flowers or vines. So as tongue-in-cheek as the tweet may have been, super cool word to investigate. And Lana there in the chat box has given a list of WR words that you could put up with with your kiddos, and I can throw them in the email as well. But talking about, does it have this sense of twisting or distortion? And if it does, let's go dig into that word and see if there is this Germanic connection because of that WR spelling. So there we go. Take that, bushy circle. Okay, the next word that I picked, and like literally could have picked any word. I was trying to pick words, though, that weren't necessarily Christmas in nature, because sometimes that can be exclusionary depending on the school and the students and those kinds of things. So I wanted to pick some general ones. If you want to target in and pick some very specific seasonal words, you can obviously do that. So I looked up December. I'm fascinated by a lot of this stuff, but this one just like cracked me right up. So I didn't necessarily know this. Maybe you guys are walking around with this level of Jeopardy information that I just didn't have. But even though December is the 12th and last month of the calendar, month of winter solstice. So that's the definition you'll see there in the quotes. Late Old English, Old French, Décembre. Then we have Latin, December, from decem, meaning 10. And you're like, wait a second, it just said it was the 12th month? Because in the old Roman calendar, it started in March. So December was the 10th month. So then, well, it explains where the burr came from. The BER in 4 Latin month names, probably from BRIS, which was an adjectival, I don't know how to say that word, suffix. Tucker thinks, I don't know who Tucker is, but this guy, T.G. Tucker, the etymological dictionary of Latin, thinks that the first 5 months were named for their positions in the agriculture cycle. And once the crops were in, we just numbered them. that makes me like, that's just funny. Like these months here were important in the Roman calendar because food was made. After that, you just get a number. It's like you've had so many kids, all these kids get a name. And then after this, you just get, you're 6, you're 7, you're 8, 9, and 10. Like that's all I got. I just think that's super funny. So you could jump this into more study of the other months of the year, or starting in March, what is March named after, and how does that connect to the agricultural cycle in Rome? You could then build it out into other conversations about month naming in other cultures. Like I've got going way off track now, but this, when the trees crackle with cold, it's a Cree calendar, and it talks about the different names of the months of the year. So I thought that was really funny, that December means 10th, even though it's the 12th month. And the last one came to me while we were caroling, because what is a Yule, and what is Yuletide treasure? Now, as I look in this song, Deck the Halls, there's lots of words that I could investigate here. Fa la 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 is not one of them, but I could look up the word holly or boughs or ancient, blazing, treasure, passes. What are the other words in the PASS family? So you don't have to necessarily pick these words. There could be other words that you investigate, but I'm going to take us here to the definition, the etymology dictionary entry here. Now, I don't speak Old English, but I think the G made a different sound in Old English. But it literally meant Christmas Day. Yule equals Christmas Day. And so it obviously goes on in its discussion of this word. And you all can read, so I don't need to read it to you. And then Yuletide is a compound word with Yule and tide. And in this case, tide meant a portion of time. So Yuletide is literally Christmas time, and Yule means Christmas. So I thought that was kind of funny. Interesting. Unique. It piqued my interest.